Hi, this is Arthur, and this is a summary and explanation of all Archon quests released in the game Genshin Impact version 5.7. The Traveler and Paimon are walking near the Collective of Plenty tribe and bump into Yansan. Yansan is patrolling the area and asks the Traveler to help. The Traveler agrees to help and patrols the area in her stead. The Traveler soon finds a cave with a hilichurl inside. The hilichurl runs off and the Traveler looks around the cave. Inside, the Traveler finds the key to the hibernation chamber on the spaceship that brought her to Teyvat. Side note, yes, the Traveler is apparently an alien that came to Teyvat on a spaceship. The key being in the cave is odd as the Traveler's key to the hibernation chamber is currently on her. The key in the cave is an extra one identical to hers. The Traveler and Paimon conclude the key in the cave must belong to the Traveler's sibling and the Abyss Order may be nearby. Yansan soon shows up and says the Abyss Order is attacking Natlan. The Traveler grabs the extra key in the cave and goes with Yansan to Moika to discuss the attack. They head to the Stadium of the Sacred Flame and chat with Moika. Side note, Moika distinguishes the Abyss from the Abyss Order. The Abyss is Natlan's longtime enemy whom they've fought for centuries and is capable of spawning a seemingly endless supply of enemies. The Abyss Order is the organization led by the Traveler's sibling and seems largely made up of former Khaenri'ahns. Natlan has no real history with the Abyss Order and had no major conflicts with them until now. Additional side note, I will refer to the Traveler's sibling as Aether going forward as I played as the female Traveler for this video. The Traveler tells Moika that while Aether may lead the Abyss Order, the Traveler opposes the Order and will defend Natlan from them. Moika is relieved to hear that and says the Abyss Order is attacking the Masters of the Nightwind tribe, so the Traveler and Yansan head over. Once there, they meet with Sitlali and fend off the attacking Abyss Order. After the battle, the Traveler heads back to the cave she found earlier. Once there, they meet a girl named Diridith. Diridith warns them monsters are attacking, but the Traveler and Paimon don't see any monsters. Diridith falls over and the Traveler touches her hand, which somehow allows her to now see the monsters Diridith warned of. The Traveler defeats the monsters and chats with Diridith. Diridith says she sprained her ankle and they head to the cave to rest. Diridith says she's from a nearby village and keeps talking about a savior. Diridith explains a sage once passed through her village that seemed truly omniscient. That sage said Doomsday was coming and that a savior would reveal themselves to them. As Doomsday approached, Diridith's grandmother told her to leave the village and find the savior. The description of the savior's appearance resembles the Traveler. However, Diridith doesn't think the Traveler is the savior because the savior is supposed to be the opposite gender. The group concludes the true savior must be Aether. Diridith says she will stay in the cave until she feels well enough to move and asks the Traveler to come find her if she finds Aether. The Traveler returns to the Masters of the Nightwind tribe and speaks to Yansan, Sitlali, and some guards. They tell the Traveler that the Abyss Order isn't attacking and has been seen meditating. Sitlali says she's noticed some noise in Natlan's ley lines and thinks the Abyss Order is responsible, though she doesn't know what their goal is. The Traveler tells them about Diridith, though they aren't sure what to make of it. Yansan and Sitlali leave to muster their forces and drive out the Abyss Order, and the Traveler returns to Diridith. Once at the cave, the Traveler shares a meal with Diridith and they chat a bit before invisible monsters attack again. The Traveler touches Diridith's hand, gains the ability to see the monsters again, and defeats them. They then decide to call it a night and sleep in the cave. Once asleep, the Traveler dreams of seeing Aether talking to the Lord of the Night in the Night Kingdom. She also sees images of the Doomsday Diridith was talking about. The Traveler then wakes up in the middle of the night to Diridith holding her hand. Diridith says the Traveler seemed to be having a nightmare and she tried to comfort her. They go back to sleep and the next day the Traveler prepares 3 days of food for Diridith as they expect her ankle to be healed in 3 days. After she heals, Diridith plans to go looking for the Savior and asks the Traveler how they can contact each other in the future. The Traveler tells her to write a letter to Moika who will pass along the message. Diridith says she doesn't know who Moika is. Suddenly, Abyss Order forces arrive, but this time Diridith can't see them. The Traveler touches Diridith's hand and gives her the ability to see the Abyss Order forces. The Traveler defeats the Abyss Order forces and Paimon comments on how they seem to be running from something. The Traveler is worried, so she says goodbye to Diridith and heads to the Masters of the Nightwind tribe. Once there, Yansan tells them a single person attacked the Abyss Order forces and decimated them. The Traveler thinks it's Dainsleif and heads over with Yansan to talk to him. Once there, Yansan formally greets Dainsleif before leaving to take care of other stuff. Dainsleif tells the Traveler he's never seen the Abyss Order amass forces like this before, and it is odd as Natlan is much stronger than the Order. As they don't know the Abyss Order's true goals, Dainsleif suggests they keep attacking. Dainsleif believes he can use this opportunity to eliminate the majority of the Abyss Order's forces. The Traveler also tells Dainsleif about Diridith and her search for the Savior. Dainsleif is surprised and says the Savior is a title Aether had before the cataclysm that destroyed Conria hundreds of years ago. Dainsleif says the Vinster King and the entire court of Conria proclaimed Aether would save Conria, though it ultimately didn't work out that way. Dainsleif suspects Diridith is a descendant of pure-blooded Conrians afflicted with the curse of immortality. Dainsleif figures these Conrians must have resettled somewhere remote and passed down to Diridith their belief in the Savior. Dainsleif and the Traveler decide to call it a day and meet again the next day. The next day, they meet with Iansan, who tells them the Abyss Order's headquarters in Natlan are in Cinder City. Iansan still needs some time to gather Natlan's forces, so Dainsleif and the Traveler go to Cinder City first. Once there, they fight through waves of the Abyss Order's forces and eventually meet a member of the Order named Hayden. Hayden says that despite their defeat here, the Abyss Order has already won. Hayden says Aether infiltrated the Night Kingdom and exploited that realm's experience with leyline reconstruction. Aether then used the Loom of Fate to reweave the ley lines of Conria. Hayden says Conria is revived and all of his slain comrades will forget their centuries of struggle and begin their lives anew. After hearing Hayden's words, the Traveler thinks Diridith may be a Conrian from the past, somehow communicating with the present. The Traveler and Dainsleif defeat Hayden and the Traveler leaves to see Diridith. Dainsleif then talks to Hayden. Both Dainsleif and Hayden are Conrians who suffer from the curse of immortality. Hayden was once Dainsleif's master and taught him the sword. Hayden mentions that during the Cataclysm, Aether was nowhere to be found. Despite that, Hayden follows Aether today as his remorse seems genuine. Dainsleif mentions one of his co-students was Sertologi and talks about punishments they received from Hayden when they were students. Hayden says he can't remember much as his memories, spirit, emotions, and personality have all eroded. Hayden apologizes for his misdeeds in the past and asks Dainsleif to tell him about Conria. Feeling pity, Dainsleif speaks at length about Conria's past. Hayden then reveals he lied before and that Conria has not yet been revived. In order to revive Conria and its ley lines, they need to retrieve almost all memories of Conria from that age. When Natlan's forces saw the Abyss Order meditating earlier, they were actually offering their memories to the Loom of Fate. However, the Abyss Order's memories faded over time and are not enough. This is why they needed Dainsleif. Dainsleif wears a ring from his older brother that continuously resets his body's condition. While Dainsleif's memories are still susceptible to erosion, he still remembers more of Conria than they do. The Abyss Order's goal in attacking Natlan was to bait out Dainsleif so they can access his memories. With Dainsleif's memories, Conria can now be revived. Dainsleif says he hopes it was worth it as he will now slay Hayden 100 more times. We change perspectives to the Traveler who finds Diridith staring at the sky. Diridith grabs the Traveler's hand and they both look at the cataclysm that befell Conria 500 years ago. Diridith realizes they aren't from the same time and the Traveler confirms she's from Diridith's future. Diridith asks the Traveler not to tell her of the future and says she still believes the Savior will save them. Diridith says when she finds Aether she'll need something to prove that she already met the Traveler. The Traveler then realizes the hilichurl she scared out of the cave earlier may have been Diridith. Side note, the player can now decide whether to give the extra key for her hibernation chamber to Diridith or to keep it. Either way, the story progresses mostly the same. Time suddenly freezes and Aether appears, commenting on how Istaroth, the ruler of time, must have made this possible. During the cataclysm in Conria 500 years ago, Aether was there, preparing to fight for Conria. That's when Diridith found him, told him about meeting the Traveler, and showed him the key to the hibernation chamber. Aether says that when he first awoke in Tevat, he searched the world for the Traveler, but never found her. With the news from Diridith, Aether decided to abandon Conria and find the Traveler. Aether later did find the Traveler, still hibernating in her chamber. Aether then grabbed the Traveler and ran. Aether says that right now they are at an intersection in their memories, likely made possible by Istaroth. The Traveler asks Aether if he has succeeded in reviving Conria. Aether says no, but he completed the important step of reconstructing Conria's ley lines. Aether thought Tevat's ley lines were locked by the heavenly principles, but Natlan's Night Kingdom seemed to be an exception to that rule. After ordering the Abyss Order to feign an attack on Natlan, Aether entered the Night Kingdom to negotiate with the Lord of the Night. The Lord of the Night said it cannot host new ley lines, but gave Aether permission to some room in the Night Kingdom to use the Loom of Fate and carry out the weaving process. Aether then used the Loom of Fate to grow a realm based on the Khaenri'ah of 500 years ago and superimpose it over present-day Natlan spacetime. That superimposition is how the Traveler met Deredith. This new Khaenri'ah was enriched with the memories from the Abyss Order through meditation. The Loom of Fate then finished its work and produced what Aether calls an atlas of the New World. This atlas holds within it the entire network of new Khaenri'ah's ley lines. Khaenri'ah can now rise again as soon as Aether finds a suitable host location for it. The Traveler asks why Aether is doing all this, and Aether says that when he first woke up 500 years ago, he lost all his memories. Aether later recovered those memories, but only after living in Khaenri'ah for a while. Aether sees Khaenri'ah as his second home, which is why he feels so guilty about its fall. Aether also wants to speak with the heavenly principles, but he needs the might of an entire world to do so. Side note, if the player chose not to give a key to Deredith, Aether will now give Deredith his key in order to maintain the time paradox. Suddenly, Aether notices a portal nearby that resembles the portals used by the being they fought at the very beginning of the game. The portal closes, Aether collects this new Khaenri'ah into the Atlas and disappears along with Deredith. The Traveler returns to the Masters of the Nightwind tribe and Iansan says the Abyss Order has made a full retreat. Sitlali comes by and says she's spoken to the Lord of the Night and she has the gist of what happened. Sitlali explains the Lord of the Night was intrigued with how the Loom of Fate could potentially preserve an entire nation in the form of an atlas. That's why she gave Aether permission to do what he did. However, the Lord of the Night imposed an additional condition to its deal with Aether, though it won't disclose that condition to Sitlali. The Traveler then returns to Deredith's cave and falls asleep, faintly feeling the sensation of someone clasping her hand. And that is the end of this quest in this video. If you liked what you've seen here, please like, comment, and subscribe.